silence, and listen. There are moments in history when the boundary between heaven and earth seems to grow thin. Moments when something forbidden crosses from the unseen into the world of men. Long before prophets spoke in thunder, before empires rose and fell, there lived a man who crossed that boundary. A man who entered the heavens and returned with knowledge never meant for human minds. His name was Enoch. Unlike every other man of his time, Enoch did not simply live and die. He vanished from the earth. And the ancient texts tell us that God himself took him. But the story does not end there. Because according to the oldest forbidden traditions, Enoch returned. And what he brought back would reshape the destiny of the world. If you feel that some truths were never meant to disappear, if you sense that ancient knowledge is still calling, you can subscribe and walk this forbidden path with me. Before the flood reshaped the face of the earth, humanity lived closer to its origin. The memory of the first light had not yet faded. The distance between the divine and the mortal was not yet a silent abyss. Generations passed like slow-moving stars across the night of early history. Names echoed through bloodlines, carrying the weight of the beginning. 7 generations after Adam, a name appears that does not fade quietly into the dust. Enoch. The ancient record gives us very little about him. Only a handful of sentences. But those sentences break the pattern of every life before and after him. It tells us that Enoch lived, that he became the father of Methuselah, and that he walked with God. And then it says something no other human story dares to say. It says that Enoch was not. For God took him. No grave. No farewell. No record of death. Only absence. But absence is not the same as an ending. And disappearance is not the same as silence. Because hidden beneath the surface of Scripture lies a forbidden story. A story of a man who traveled through the heavens. A story of watchers, celestial gates, and knowledge that fractured the early world. Tonight, we begin that journey. Those ancient words are brief, but they carry the weight of something far greater than a simple disappearance. They suggest that what happened to Enoch was not an accident of history. It was an intentional act. In every other life recorded in those early pages, the pattern is clear and unbroken. They lived. They had sons and daughters. And they died. But when the text reaches Enoch, the rhythm falters. The expected ending never arrives. The story simply breaks open. He walked with God. And then, suddenly, he was not. This strange phrase has troubled readers for thousands of years. Because it does not explain. It does not clarify. It only invites the imagination to stand at the edge of an unspeakable event. Some have said it means that Enoch lived a righteous life. Others insist it points to an unmatched intimacy with the divine. But neither explanation satisfies the lingering unease carried by those words. Because the text does not say that Enoch dreamed of God. It does not say that he searched for him from afar. It says that he walked with him. And walking implies movement, direction, companionship. It implies a shared path. If this were merely poetry, it might comfort us. But the ancient writer does not present it as poetry. He presents it as history. And that is what makes Enoch so unsettling. His story refuses to stay safely symbolic. It presses against the boundary where metaphor becomes testimony. For generations, scholars tried to read around this tension. They tried to explain it away. They tried to soften the meaning of what the words plainly suggest. But the mystery endured. Quiet. Unresolved. Waiting beneath the surface of sacred history. Until forbidden texts began to whisper a very different version of Enoch's fate. Long after the book of Genesis fell silent about Enoch, other writings began to speak. Fragments at first, then fuller visions, and finally, whole narratives that dared to describe what Scripture only hinted at. These writings would come to be known as the Book of Enoch. Texts preserved outside the boundaries of official canon. Texts whispered about, guarded, feared, and sometimes openly rejected. Not because they lacked power, but because they had too much of it. In these forbidden visions, Enoch is no longer a silent figure who vanishes between two verses. He becomes a witness, a traveler, a man drawn into the hidden structure of the universe itself. According to these ancient accounts, the moment Enoch was taken, the world did not simply lose him. Another world received him. He was guided through thresholds no human eyes had ever crossed, through boundaries guarded by beings whose existence most of humanity would one day forget. The journey was not gentle. It was not a dream. It was not a peaceful drifting into light. It was an ascent, a crossing of realms stacked one above another like hidden chambers in the sky. In the first realm, the air still carried echoes of the world below. The memory of wind, the weight of gravity, the distant pull of mortal time. But with every level he passed, something changed. The light grew heavier. The silence grew deeper. The presence of unseen powers became impossible to ignore. And Enoch did not turn back. It is here, in the higher regions of the ascent, that the ancient writings introduced the beings known as the Watchers. Not angels as later tradition imagined them, but sentinels, observers placed over the world to guard the order of creation. They are described as luminous, immense, and terrifying in their clarity. Beings whose presence bends the air and stills the will. According to the forbidden texts, these watchers were entrusted with a sacred task: to observe humanity, to preserve the boundaries of heaven and earth, and to never cross them. But something went wrong. Something ancient, deliberate, and irreversible. Some of the watchers looked down upon the daughters of men, and desire awakened where it had never been allowed to exist. They abandoned their stations. They descended. They crossed the boundary that was never meant to be crossed. And with that fall, the structure of the world began to fracture. The forbidden texts say that these fallen watchers took human wives, and from that union were born beings of monstrous power, giants who shook the earth with their violence. But the corruption did not end with physical destruction. Something far more dangerous was also released into the world: forbidden knowledge. The Watchers did not only take flesh. They gave humanity secrets. Secrets that were never meant to be taught. They taught the crafting of weapons, the cutting of stones, the binding of metals, the secrets of the stars, the hidden movements of the heavens. And with each forbidden lesson, the balance of the world shifted. This is the corrupted world into which Enoch was taken. A world already wounded by knowledge it could not carry. The violence of the giants spread across the earth like a shadow that had learned to consume. The cries of humanity rose upward, not in prayer, but in desperation. The ancient writings say that the sound of suffering reached the highest realms. It reached the Watchers who had remained faithful, and it reached the throne of judgment itself. The fallen Watchers were summoned, not to be forgiven, but to be judged. Chains were prepared for them, places of darkness beyond the limits of the visible world. Prisons not of stone, but of cosmic boundary and divine decree. And yet, before their final sentence was carried out, they made an unthinkable request. They asked for Enoch. The fallen ones, the very beings who had shattered the order of the world, asked a human to speak on their behalf. They asked Enoch to walk once more between heaven and earth. They asked him to carry their plea for mercy into the presence of eternal judgment. And this is where the meaning of forbidden knowledge twists in a way that few ever notice. Because the Watchers did not only give secrets to humanity, they now sought something from a human in return. After hearing this, it is impossible to remain neutral. Do you believe Enoch should have spoken on behalf of the fallen Watchers? Or do you believe their fate was already sealed? Leave your answer in the comments. Enoch accepted the impossible task. He ascended once more. This time not as a witness, but as an intercessor. He carried the plea of condemned beings into the heart of the divine realm, and the answer he received would echo through every age that followed. Enoch entered the higher chambers of the heavens trembling under the weight of what he carried. Not the chains of the Watchers, not the crimes of their descent, but their final plea. The forbidden texts describe a realm of fire and crystal, a throne not built by hands, a presence so vast that even the heavenly beings veiled themselves before it. There Enoch spoke, not as a judge, not as a ruler, but as a messenger trembling between worlds. He delivered the plea of the fallen Watchers, their words of regret, their longing for reversal, their fear of the darkness that awaited them. And then the heavens answered. The sentence was irreversible. The Watchers would not be restored. The knowledge they had unleashed would not be erased. And the world would bear the scar of their rebellion until the end of ages. Enoch was commanded to return with the verdict, not as an act of mercy, but as an act of truth. And it was at that moment, the forbidden writings whisper, that the knowledge truly began to flow into him. Not from the Watchers, but from the structure of creation itself. He was shown the courses of the stars, the hidden mechanisms of the sun and the moon, the gates through which the winds are released, the storehouses of snow and fire. He was shown the balance that holds chaos back from swallowing the world, the fragile line that separates order from annihilation. This was the knowledge no human had ever carried before. Knowledge too vast for language, too heavy for memory. After receiving what no human mind had ever been meant to hold, Enoch was led back down through the same layers of heaven, down through the same burning silence, down toward the fragile world of dust and breath. But he did not return as the man who had once walked the earth. His eyes had seen too much. His memory carried patterns older than the stars. The ancient writings say that when he arrived among men again, he did not speak at first. He watched. He listened. And he wept. Because the world he returned to was sinking deeper into violence. The giants still roamed. The forbidden arts were spreading. And the memory of the divine order was fading. Enoch now carried knowledge that could illuminate the path of humanity. But that same knowledge could also destroy what little balance remained. To speak was dangerous. To remain silent was unbearable. The forbidden texts tell us that Enoch chose to write. He etched the visions into words. He carved the movements of heaven into memory, so that a distant generation might understand what his own world could not. He wrote of the Watchers, of their fall, of their chains, of the judgment that awaited them. He wrote of the paths of the stars, of the hidden order beneath the chaos, of the ages that would rise and fall before the end. These writings were not meant for his own time. They were meant for a distant generation, for a world that would one day be ready to hear what it had rejected. As the years passed, Enoch's presence among men grew lighter, not because he abandoned the world, but because the world no longer fully belonged to him. He walked among his people with a silence that was not emptiness. It was fullness restrained, a fire held behind a calm surface. The ancient writings suggest that even those closest to him sensed the change. They said his gaze no longer rested only on what was visible, as if part of him remained fixed on higher realms. And then, as before, the pattern of human life broke once again. There was no illness, no long descent into weakness, no final gathering at a bedside. The forbidden texts say that the heavens opened for him a second time, not as a summons for testimony, but as an invitation to dwell beyond the limits of time. And once again, Enoch was not. The earth released him, and the heavens received him. But the knowledge he carried did not vanish with him. It remained behind, hidden in fragments, preserved in whispers, guarded by fear and longing in equal measure. The ancient world was not ready for what Enoch had seen, so the knowledge was sealed, not by force, but by time. Generations rose and fell. The flood came. The world was reshaped, and the words of Enoch passed into shadow. For centuries, the name of Enoch faded from the surface of human memory, not erased, only buried beneath the weight of time. But the forbidden texts did not vanish completely. They survived in fragments, in hidden communities, in distant languages, in places where silence protected what the world would not understand. Long after temples rose and fell, long after kingdoms turned to dust, the writings of Enoch began to surface again. Not as official scripture, but as something far more dangerous. They reappeared in the margins of religious thought, in the hands of mystics, in the questions of scholars, in the fears of authorities. The more these writings were studied, the more unsettling they became, because they did not merely expand known theology, they challenged it. They spoke openly of watchers, of forbidden descents, of cosmic rebellions, of knowledge given too early. And they hinted that humanity's suffering was not only the result of human failure, but of an ancient intervention that had never been fully undone. For some, these texts were a key that unlocked hidden layers of sacred history. For others, they were too dangerous to be read aloud. So the book of Enoch was pushed to the edges once again. Not burned, not erased, but quietly set aside. Yet forbidden knowledge has a nature of its own. It does not disappear forever. It waits. In every age, there comes a moment when forgotten knowledge begins to stir again. Not through thunder, not through proclamation, but through quiet questions that refuse to remain silent. Our world believes it stands at the peak of understanding. We map the stars. We split the atom. We bend information around the globe in an instant. And yet, with all our knowledge, the ancient questions have not died. Where did evil truly begin? Why does violence return in cycles? And why does forbidden knowledge always seem to arrive before wisdom is ready to receive it? The story of Enoch suddenly feels uncomfortably close. Not as myth, but as a mirror. We too live in an age of watchers. Satellites that observe every movement. Algorithms that predict desire. Eyes in the sky that never blink. And just like in the ancient world, knowledge flows faster than the soul can carry it. Power arrives before restraint. Tools of creation are also tools of annihilation. The forbidden pattern repeats. Not with giants of flesh, but with giants of code, fire, and unseen systems. And so the story of Enoch returns to us not as an ancient warning, but as a living one. Because the question is no longer only what knowledge Enoch brought back. The question is what we are doing with the knowledge we now possess. There comes a moment in every hidden story when the listener must decide what kind of witness they will be. Not to the past, but to the truth it carries forward. Because once you have heard what Enoch saw, once you have followed him beyond the borders of the visible world, you cannot return to innocence. You can only return with awareness. The forbidden knowledge does not ask for belief. It asks for courage. If you are one of those who senses that some truths were hidden for a reason, if you feel that ancient warnings still breathe beneath modern silence, then this path is already calling you. Subscribe not to follow a channel, but to stand among those who are willing to look where others turn away. Because once this door is opened, the knowledge does not stop returning. The forbidden texts say that Enoch was shown not only the past, and not only the present, but the full arc of what was still to come. He saw kingdoms rise like waves, and shatter like glass. He saw generations multiply, and vanish like mist. He saw that knowledge would never leave the world again, only change its face, only change its language. He saw that humanity would one day command forces that once belonged only to the heavens. Fire that thinks, eyes that never sleep, voices that speak without bodies. And he saw that the greatest danger would no longer be ignorance, but knowledge without reverence. In the final vision, the forbidden texts say, Enoch saw mankind standing again at the same threshold. Not beneath angels, but above tools it barely understands. The same choice returns in every age. To receive knowledge as wisdom, or to seize it as power. And this is why the story of Enoch never truly ended. Because the moment he crossed the heavens, he also crossed into every future generation, including ours. Enoch walked where no human had ever walked. He saw what no human was meant to see. And he returned carrying a weight that even heaven itself treated with caution. Not all knowledge is given as a gift. Some knowledge is given as a test. The forbidden texts leave us with no comforting conclusion. They do not tell us that humanity learned its lesson. They only show us that the choice was placed before us once more. And perhaps that is why Enoch was taken alive. Not as a reward, but as a warning that still watches the world from beyond it. If what you have heard tonight has unsettled you, that is no accident. Truth is not meant to comfort. It is meant to awaken. This has only been the outer layer of Enoch's journey. The first veil. The visible surface of a much deeper descent into forbidden history. The complete journey continues beyond this threshold. The visions in full. The watchers in detail. The cosmic laws Enoch recorded. The knowledge that reshaped everything. If you are ready to go further, the full voyage is waiting. Not here, but beyond this gate. And like every forbidden threshold, it only opens to those who choose to cross it.